And to help us understand the importance, though, of investing in the decarbonization of the maritime industry, we're joined by Johannah Christensen, CEO of Global Maritime Forum. Johannah, thanks for joining me this morning. So let's start with the International Maritime Organization, and it has a 2050 decarbonization target. Is the industry on track, and what are the biggest challenges it faces in achieving these goals?
One of the exciting things about the industry right now is that there's so much activity going on at a global scale, including here in Singapore. What we see is companies from all across the maritime value chain experimenting, piloting new fuels, engines and technologies to bring themselves on track to meet this goal set by the International Maritime Organization. What we need is zero-emission ships operating on the deep seas at scale by 2030 and beginning to really scale up new technologies and new green fuels, such as the ones that were mentioned in the previous segment. So this is a really exciting opportunity, but also a huge challenge because the technologies and the fuels are simply not available at scale yet. So we have this task before us this decade to mature the technologies, to make sure that they are ready for use so that we can scale them up over the coming decades.
And why does the decarbonization of the maritime industry, what does it look like, and why is it so important? After all, shipping is not included in the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, it is, but for sectors to decarbonize at a global scale, shipping needs to decarbonize as well. Shipping is part of every other company's value chain. So when we ship goods across the globe, whether it's raw materials such as iron ore, or whether it's chemical products, or whether it's end consumer goods, so our iPads and our various other consumer goods, they get shipped around the world. So if Apple is to decarbonize, they need shipping to decarbonize. Otherwise, they are not able to meet their own goals under the ambitions sent out under the Paris Agreement. Of course, shipping has its own international regulator, and you mentioned in your introduction that a 50% reduction target has been set in 2018, and that's what the industry is working towards. However, we have later this year an incredibly important meeting coming up in the International Maritime Organization, where countries represented there are discussing whether to ramp up that ambition. And so we very much hope that that will be the case, that an ambition will be set to fully decarbonize the sector by 2050, and that the countries there who are represented at the IMO will also adopt the policy measures that will support the sector's transition. Because what we see right now is that the fuels that are in play to replace the green fuels that are in play to replace fossil fuels are significantly more expensive than the fuels used by the industry today. So we need to figure out how do we close that cost gap. And there are lots of different tools in the toolbox. One way is to impose a levy, for example. Another way is there are various different mechanisms that could be used. In the early phases, what it's probably about is ambitious investors. It's about support for first movers in the industry to make sure that we can get the technologies into a place where they can be scaled up.
Let's talk about those technologies then. What are the key technologies that are going to enable the shipping industry to achieve its green goals?
So really a lot of it depends on investment on land. The fuels that are in play that can scale up to the degree that we need it are going to be based on renewable energy. So they're green hydrogen-derived fuels that will be produced using renewable energy. And so basically what we need, and the sort of the $1 trillion investment that you mentioned at the top, that is really about the vast majority of that will happen on land into renewable energy infrastructure to produce those fuels for the shipping industry. Of course, there will be some investment in new vessels. We need new engine technologies and the like, new bunkering facilities and infrastructure to make the fuels available where we need them. But a lot of the investment is actually in the production of the fuels, and of which especially the scaling up of renewable energy at a global level will be necessary.
Quite a bit of investment you're talking about here. Collaboration as well, regulation will be needed. for all this to work. Is that where public-private partnerships come into play?
Yeah, very much so, and this is where we're quite excited about we've got a really great group of companies and other stakeholders coming together today, experts, policymakers, and the like, who are meeting today to discuss this specific challenge. How do we work together to make the technologies work, to make the financing work, to make the regulation work, so it's all working together in tandem towards our collective goal of decarbonizing the sector.
And what should we be looking out for in the short and medium term that will tell us that the maritime industry is moving in the right direction on this?
Well, first of all, we should be seeing are we seeing the investments that are needed into the critical technology. So that's both the ships and the engines and their availability, but it's also very much in the availability of the green fuels and into the bunkering infrastructure. And of course, Singapore is a major bunkering hub, so we very much are looking to Singapore as well to play its role in that regard. We should also be looking at later this year what comes out of the International Maritime Organization and whether we achieve the ambitious targets that we need to put the sector on track, as well as the policies to support the transition. So those are some of the early indications that we hope to see. Already we're seeing so much collaboration across the sector, and that's really, really exciting. So there's a lot of energy being dedicated to making this possible. But of course, we need so much more, and we need all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, it's good to see some traction sort of taking place in the space. We understand that one way to accelerate decarbonization is to implement initiatives like green corridors or specific trade routes between major port hubs where zero-emission solutions are supported. Could you explain to us a bit how that would work and how far away we are from that happening, or is it happening already?
Yeah, so this is a really exciting concept. Basically what it's about is it's a way of simplifying the challenge. It's a way of looking at where are the conditions favorable for deploying the first green ships, if you will, the first zero-emission vessels. And there are lots of geographies where that really makes sense. Major trade routes where either the green fuel can be available at a favorable cost, or where there's a good policy environment, so potential support from government or other stakeholders that are willing to say, okay, this is an opportunity that we want to realize. So at present, there are about 20 or so corridors under development across the globe, and that's everything from container trade from Rotterdam to Singapore, to iron ore being transported from Australia to Asia, Japan, Korea, China, etc. So this is super, super exciting. All of these projects are still in the early stages. This is a concept that's only developed over the past year or two, and so many of the projects are in the feasibility study phase. In the next few weeks, we'll be seeing more and more of these feasibility studies being announced, and hopefully they will be concluding that there's a good possibility, and then we will need to see whether the stakeholders will be willing to take the next steps, which is to start to form consortia or joint ventures to invest in the deployment of zero-emission vessels on these specific routes, on these green corridors.
Yeah, Johannah, we'll have to leave it there for now. All the best with the discussions at Singapore Maritime Week. Johannah Christensen, CEO of Global Maritime Forum.